At precisely 9:12 a.m., the judge raised his eyes from the confidential report and spoke my name, Senior Analyst Phoebe Jensen. The entire courtroom held its breath. My stepbrother's smirk disappeared. My mother's hand stopped, suspended in the air. These were the very people who'd always dismissed me as too dramatic, now rendered utterly silent. They had assumed this was just another messy family argument. They were wrong. This was a federal matter, backed by proof they couldn't charm or challenge. Before I explain how a daughter they overlooked used their own deceptions to silence them for good, please hit that like button and comment with where you're tuning in from. I need to know I'm not the only one who's had to choose the truth over family ties. To any observer. We were the picture-perfect family, the kind that inspires envy. The white picket fence, the immaculate hedges, the beaming smiles in every holiday photo. My mother, Sandra, orchestrated this illusion. For her, peace was a synonym for pretense, and silence was a substitute for love. That facade was paramount. My stepfather, Gary, played his part, and my stepbrother, Mark, her prized golden boy, was the star of this meticulously crafted performance. During family meals, Mom would gaze at him as if he'd personally placed the moon in the sky. Mark received another promotion. She would declare, applauding as if he'd cured a disease. He'd lift his glass, flashing that effortless smile that everyone adored, the kind that concealed the decay within. Assistant sales manager, he'd state with pride, as if it were a noble rank. The table would erupt in laughter. Everyone joined in, except for me. I can still picture myself at that table, dissecting my food as they celebrated him, feeling like a ghost in my own house. Once, I brought up that I'd just earned a federal certification, one that very few analysts ever achieve. Gary offered a distracted smile, his focus remaining on Mark. "That's nice, dear," he mumbled, patting my hand as if I presented a crayon drawing. "You just keep at that little government job. It's secure." Secure? That descriptor always seemed to come from those who had never taken a real risk. They had no concept of what it was like to be in a windowless, soundproof room parsing encrypted data that had life or death consequences. They couldn't grasp the burden of holding classified intelligence. I had given up trying to enlighten them long ago. When you're raised as a spare part in another person's family unit, you master the language of silence. You learn to minimize your presence, to feign smiles at the appropriate moments, and to stifle your own voice before it causes friction. My mother preferred me that way. "Phoebe, you overthink everything," she'd often say. "Just relax and enjoy life." But she wasn't concerned with my enjoyment. She was concerned with not disrupting hers. Every holiday, the dynamic was identical. Mark would appear hours late, partially intoxicated, and armed with a slew of excuses. Mom's face would illuminate as if the holiday had just begun. "Oh, Mark, I'm so happy you're here," she would rave. If I were the one running late, I'd get a pointed look at her watch and a heavy sigh. Punctuality reflects character, Phoebe. You can spend your entire existence trapped by someone else's conflicting rules before you recognize it's suffocating you. It wasn't overt hatred. It was something more insidious. I was completely invisible to them. In their narrative, I was just part of the scenery. The responsible one. The daughter who required no validation. Who wouldn't rock the boat. They misinterpreted my quiet compliance as agreement. I once believed that maintaining harmony was a virtue. But harmony without honesty isn't harmony at all. It's stagnation. A specific memory remains particularly painful. A summer barbecue, the year before it all unraveled. Mark was by the grill, boasting to Gary about his job. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of cheap beer. I recall the sunlight catching Mom's hair as she laughed aloud. Unrestrained laugh reserved only for Mark. When I attempted to share a significant victory my team's analysis had just thwarted and overseas, Sretchi dismissed it with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "You do make everything sound so intense, Phoebe. Just unwind and have a good time." Dramatic. That word lodged itself in my mind like a shard of glass. Later that night, long after they were asleep, I sat on the back steps with a mug of black coffee, staring into the darkened yard. Fireflies pulsed over the lawn in the humid air. I reflected on how, in my professional life, accuracy and quiet saved lives. In this home, quiet just enabled deceit. I wasn't aware of it then, but a fundamental change was occurring within me, solidifying into something resolute. The next time my mother used that word, dramatic, it wouldn't be a flippant dismissal over dinner. It would be a judgment she would wish she could take back. It occurred on one of those nights that shouldn't exist, oppressive with heat, quiet, and the reek of whiskey. It was 4 a.m. when I heard the sound of glass smashing against the counter, followed by Mark's voice slurred, cutting, and spoiling for a confrontation. I discovered him in the kitchen, illuminated by the cold, blue light of the refrigerator. The atmosphere was rank with alcohol and entitlement. He turned as I entered. "Can't sleep either." Ha! His smile was twisted and cruel. "What's the matter, agent girl? Still pretending you're superior to us?" I kept my tone level, measured. "You need to go to sleep, Mark. You're done." That was my initial error, sounding composed. To him, calm signaled control, and he detested anything he couldn't control. He moved nearer, brandishing the empty bottle. "You think that pointless desk job makes you important? You don't even have a real life, Phoebe. Mom says you just hide in that job because nobody actually wants you around." The insult landed with more force than it should have, likely because the words weren't just his. They were hers, repurposed and aimed to wound. From the den, I could hear quiet chuckling. My mother and stepfather, they weren't asleep. They were awake. They were listening. I turned from him, grabbing a towel to clean the spill. Anything to de-escalate. That's when I heard the kitchen drawer being pulled open, the distinct sound of metal scraping wood. I spun back. He was holding a screwdriver. "Mark, no," I said. My voice was firmer than I felt. "Put that down." He grinned a wide, distorted expression. "You are so dramatic." And then he lunged out and intense. Searing pain ripped through my shoulder. It was immediate and burning. My legs buckled. The floor rushed up to meet me, and my vision tilted. I could feel the sticky warmth seeping through my shirt, the slickness of my own blood. And above the pain, I heard it. Laughter. Soft at first, then growing. My mother's voice, drifting into the room like a toxin. "Oh, Mark, honestly, she likely just tripped. Phoebe, stop being so dramatic." The kitchen tilted. The walls felt like they were shrinking. In that space between agony and disbelief, a part of me simply disconnected. I recall gazing up at the textured ceiling, noting how peaceful the world becomes when you finally abandon all hope of anyone else intervening. Then, through the ringing in my ears, I registered that I was still conscious, still breathing, and still in command of the one thing left, my next move. The next time I opened my eyes, the world was sterile, white, and humming. The sharp scent of antiseptic came first, followed by the rhythmic beeping of machinery. My shoulder throbbed with fire. For a second, I mistook the silence for safety until I heard her voice. "Oh, thank heavens. You're conscious?" my mother said. Her tone was practiced, brittle. She was seated neatly by the bed, her hands clasped as if in prayer. Gary lingered behind her, affecting a look of concern. "You really frightened us, honey. You tripped and landed on the toolbox. Mark is just devastated about it." I looked at her, the words slowly processing. "I fell." She nodded rapidly. "Too rapidly. You know how you get when you're overtired. It was just an accident. Nobody's fault." That single sentence, that perfectly constructed fabrication of reality, broke something inside me. I could still see the shine of the metal, the blood on the kitchen floor, her laughter. And now, she was erasing it. They weren't shielding me. They were shielding him. I willed my face to remain impassive. My professional training engaged like a reflex. Observe. Assess. Control. "Where is Mark?" I asked. "He's at home," Gary replied. "He's been beside himself all night. You should have seen him. He was in tears." Tears? Right. The same man who'd called me pathetic just hours before. "I'll be okay," I said quietly, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Could you please give me a moment alone?" My mother smiled, visibly relieved that her narrative had been accepted. "Of course, dear. We'll bring you a change of clothes later." They exited the room without a backward glance. The instant the door latched, I let out a slow, controlled breath. My hand shook as I reached for my phone on the bedside table. The hospital's harsh lighting reflected on the dark screen, showing me a face I hardly knew, pale, composed, with eyes far colder than I remembered. I unlocked the device and accessed the secure line, the one my family had no knowledge of. My fingers moved with automatic precision, muscle memory taking over from the pain. When the operator responded, I spoke with clarity. "This is Analyst Phoebe Jensen. I am reporting an assault on a federal employee and am activating a duress protocol." There was a brief pause. "Confirmed, Analyst Jensen. Duress code registered at 0405 hours. An incident file has been opened." I didn't feel relief, not in the traditional sense. What I felt was certainty, the kind of clarity that arrives when you stop wondering why and start acting on fact. In a matter of hours, a legal liaison from my agency was there, Anna Reyes. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, entirely professional. She didn't bother with platitudes. "You made the correct move," she stated, opening a file. "Your distress signal initiated a standard wellness check. The paramedic team found you on the floor with a penetrating wound. It is all documented. We will allow the evidence to speak for itself." I nodded, my voice steady. "They believe this is a private family issue." A small smile touched her lips. "Then we will demonstrate that it is not." As she prepared to leave, I saw my reflection in the dark hospital window shoulder, bandaged, eyes steady. For the first time, I didn't feel like the overlooked daughter. I felt like a threat, and I had the documentation to back it up. The courtroom had the aroma of old files and burnt coffee, a place where the truth felt stifled. I entered behind my attorney, Anna Reyes, my back straight despite the lingering ache in my shoulder. On the other side of the room sat my mother, my stepfather, and Mark. He looked clean-cut, hair combed, tie slightly to snug. A small smirk played on his lips. The exact same one he wore the night he plunged a screwdriver into me. My mother's gaze met mine, a mixture of annoyance and pity. To her, this was just an embarrassing spectacle. She had repeated her version of the story so many times, she now believed it. Anna leaned in. "He's up first," she whispered. "Just let him dig his own grave." Mark's attorney, a local type with polished shoes and a practiced smile, stood up with a flourish. "Your Honor," he started, "this entire situation has been escalated unnecessarily. It is, at its core, a simple family dispute. Ms. Jensen, my client's stepsister, is known for her emotional reactions and a tendency to exaggerate. Her own mother is prepared to testify that she often dramatizes things. The air thinned. There it was. Dramatic. my mother's favorite weapon against me. The lawyer continued, shuffling his notes with theatrical importance. My client deeply regrets the unfortunate event that led to Ms. Jensen's minor injury, but we will show there was absolutely no malicious intent. It was, quite simply, an accident. When he concluded, he glanced at my family, as if awaiting a standing ovation. My mother nodded in agreement. Gary let out a breath like a man relieved of a great burden, and Mark leaned back, adjusting his tie with a casual shrug. Anna waited a beat before rising, her movements calm and deliberate. Your Honor, she said, the petitioner wishes to submit into evidence Diplomatic Security Service Report number 77B, along with corresponding 911 logs and sworn federal affidavits. Mark's lawyer chuckled quietly. Your Honor, this is a domestic issue, not a federal investigation. The judge, a silver-haired man with tired eyes, lifted an eyebrow. That's a bold assertion, Counselor. Let's examine the file. Anna passed the sealed envelope over. The judge inspected the official seal before breaking it. His eyes moved across the first page, then the second. The rustle of paper was the only sound. His expression shifted from mild interest to shock, and then to a cold fury. This report, he stated, his voice measured, confirms the activation of a level for duress protocol under the State Department's security framework. He looked up, his gaze fixing on Mark. It details that senior analyst Phoebe Jensen, an employee with active federal clearance, sent a distress signal at 04:05 hours. The system logged her precise coordinates and dispatched an immediate wellness team. A wave of murmurs passed through the gallery. The judge continued reading, his voice harder now. Arriving paramedics discovered Ms. Jensen semi-conscious on her kitchen floor, suffering from a puncture wound consistent with a Phillips head screwdriver. Her blood was identified on both the weapon and her attire. Furthermore, toxicology reports placed Mr. Mark Jensen's blood alcohol content at 0.16. He set the papers down, his eyes narrowed. Do you want to revise your testimony, Mr. Jensen? Mark gaped, his mouth opening and closing. That's not. The judge cut him off. Not what occurred, or just not what you anticipated being on the record. My mother stood up halfway. Your Honor, this is just a terrible misunderstanding. Phoebe, she's always been overly sensitive. The judge silenced her with a raised hand. Be seated, Mrs. Jensen. The silence that fell was heavy, pressing in on everyone. Anna's voice cut through it, calm and clear. Your Honor, we are not seeking monetary damages. We are simply asking that the truth be acknowledged, and that the petitioner be granted a permanent order of protection for her safety. The judge nodded slowly, turning to the report's final page. He read for a moment, then looked directly at me. His expression softened, revealing the person behind the robe. Ms. Jensen, he said, it seems your professional diligence has saved lives before. Today, that same diligence saved you. He turned his attention back to my stepbrother. Based on the facts presented to this court, I am issuing a permanent restraining order. I am also referring this case to the district attorney's office for the pursuit of formal felony assault charges. Bailiff, please remove Mr. Jensen. Mark's face went pale and empty. He looked at me, searching for any sign of mercy, but I had none left. He only stood when the bailiff took his arm. My mother's voice broke. Phoebe, no, he didn't mean it. He's your brother. Anna moved between us. That is quite close enough. Her tone was quiet, final. I remained still. I said nothing. For the first time in my life, I wasn't desperate for them to acknowledge me. They were all looking, and I felt nothing. The bailiff led Mark away, his wrists in handcuffs. My mother wept quietly. Gary just stared at the floor, as if trying to will himself invisible. The judge collected his documents. Court is adjourned, he declared, his voice echoing as the room emptied. Anna leaned toward me. You handled that well, she murmured. I didn't handle anything, I replied. I just reported the facts to the right people. We moved into the corridor. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Near the exit, two men in dark suits my colleagues were waiting. One, Director Evans, gave me a brief, professional nod. Good to see you're all right, Jensen. We will take care of the internal reporting. That was it. No emotional display. Just respect the currency I had always valued. Through the large windows, the morning sun was cutting through the gray clouds. I allowed myself to take a deep breath. The world outside hadn't changed, but I had. In the distance, I could hear my mother's voice, faint and pleading, echoing down the hall. Phoebe, please. We need to talk. I never looked back. I just walked toward the exit, each step firm and measured. My shoulder still ached, but the pain felt different now. It was a fact, not a secret. The truth had finally accomplished what I never could. It had left them speechless. Beyond the courthouse doors, the air seemed clearer. Anna matched my pace, closing her briefcase. The DA will process the charges today, she said. You won. It wasn't a game. I responded. She offered a slight, understanding smile. I know. Down on the street, Director Evans stood by a black sedan, phone to his ear. He looked up and nodded. Good to see you, Vertical. Jensen, take the rest of the week. We'll manage the fallout from here. Thank you, sir. That was all that was necessary. In my line of work, resolution is found in official reports, not emotional embraces. As his car door closed, I glanced back at the building. The sun flashed off the high windows, a bright glare like a file being closed for the last time. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel invisible. I felt complete. 1 year later, I was standing in a briefing room enclosed in glass. The city skyline spread out behind me. The plaque on the door read, Phoebe Jensen, Team Lead, Clandestine Threat Analysis. My team was assembled around the central console. Brilliant minds, calm hands, This was the family you build, not the one you're born into. A pale scar remained on my shoulder, a permanent reminder of the night I stopped seeking their validation. Just this morning, a new email from my mother surfaced in my inbox. It was long, filled with apologies and justifications. I didn't read it. I simply moved it to the archive. Some silences are choice. If you have ever had to transform betrayal into strength, tell me your story in the comments and be sure to subscribe for more.